So with Earthworks Acupuncture, and we're here with special guest Dusty Bodine, licensed acupuncturist at Alder Family Medicine, and also Tiffany Acupuncture. Dusty's also a licensed massage therapist and is currently teaching at East West College of the Healing. Talk a little further and like where you're from, your ancestry lineage, if you know that,
Yeah, yeah.
the indigenous lands that you are inhabiting currently.
Well, I'm currently on Chinook land
Mhm.
here in Portland, Oregon, and I'm of Northern European descent, mostly Swedish and Norwegian. And I grew up here in Oregon on Kalapuya land, just outside of Eugene.
Cool.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your journey into health and body work, and especially with regarding East Asian lineages.
Can I start from the beginning?
Start at the beginning.
Yeah. So in high school, I was an athlete, and my senior year, I broke my collarbone playing football, and it was bad, like a compound fracture, very bad. And it sent me into a depression because my identity was caught up in sports. And in that depression, um, I had to have surgery, had to get a titanium plate put in. And my mom, who was a music teacher, was like, Dusty, I think you should check out theater. You should go talk to the theater teacher. I think that might help you. And so I went and I decided to take a acting class. Then I auditioned for a play and I got the lead role. And we toured it and we did some other conferences in high schools and and did the show there. So it was a big life changing experience for me,
Yeah.
um, going from being an athlete to kind of getting into the arts. And then when I went to college, I continued to study theater. I was a theater arts major, and I got really into film at that time. And got this opportunity to go on tour with KRS-One. And yeah, the Godfather, the grandfather, we should say, actually, from the Bronx, the Godfather of hip hop, the teacher. And I fell in love with his message. And his message was peace, love, unity, and having fun.
Hmm.
That's his elements. That's how he does his art. That's how he does hip hop. And so it was so cool to it just like grabbed my heart so much, like this performance of hip hop, and standing up for justice and peace, love, and unity, and bringing people together. And I was the backstage cameraman where I got to watch him. Like he'd have this big long line, and people would just come, and he would just talk to them, and I got to witness all this, and I was 19. So it was like very, very impactful. But I was still always suffering from my collarbone, and was not, was still like very protective of that part of me. And after at the end of college, I got a I got a grant to make this film, and it completely failed. It was just didn't happen, and I was crushed. And so yeah, just so crushed. And I with my graduation money from friends and family, I went to New Zealand, and I found this retreat center that had yoga and meditation, and I worked in the kitchen there.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and so then I started to discover mindfulness, and I met this body worker who worked on my collarbone, and I felt like all these years of self-judgment
Mhm.
went away from this one session. Like self-judgment about like, oh, I can't be my rambunctious active self because I have this metal thing in my body.
Wow.
He helped me break that loop I had in my head.
Mm.
And then that day after that amazing session, I was chopping wood. That's one of my other activities I did for the retreat center. And I had this voice come to me, and this voice said, Dusty, do medicine. And I never had that kind of experience. And like every cell on my body like freaked out. Like I was like, oh my God, it's so true. This is what I want. Like, like this will be sweet. And so when I got home, I was telling my story to everybody. And someone told me about this house called the Sage Wellness Collective. And it was a collective of people who were interested in medicine, all living together under two roofs, in Northeast Portland.
That's here. Okay.
And yeah, and that was there I decided to go to massage school because I thought that was the easiest in to practicing medicine. It's only 1 year of school. We'll go from there. And I ended up loving it. At that house, I ended up falling in love. Uh, who's gonna have a baby now and married to her. She's a doctor.
Mhm.
And we ended up, after that my massage license, we went to Nepal with this organization called Mindful Medicine Worldwide. And there I lived in Nepal and lived in a monastery and practiced meditation. And before that, I had read Siddhartha when I was like 20.
Oh yeah.
And then I got really into meditation and reading everything I could about Buddhism and going to a lot of teachers and talking to a lot of lamas and rinpoches while I was in Nepal. And also at that clinic where I was doing body work and Brooke was seeing patients, there was lots of acupuncturists there, and I was getting acupuncture every day. And it just totally changed my energy. And even before then, I had gone to see an acupuncturist for anxiety. I have a lot of social anxiety sometimes when I'm in big groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
And after one session with him, it completely shifted me. So then that journey just kept evolving. And I knew I wanted to keep learning how to do body work and touch people. And so I kept doing massage, knowing that one day I wanted to go get a master's in East Asian medicine and Chinese medicine. And now we'll just zoom ahead. so now, 5 years later, or more than 5, 8 years later, 8 years later, I'm now practicing something called 5-element acupuncture and still doing body work. And I've gotten back into the arts since now that all that long school is over. You know what I'm talking about, Joy. Yeah, so now I'm back into creating music too, and creating art, and that is, I think, a part of my medicine as well.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think especially, like with your background, I think it's the concepts of intersectionality are really important. Not only, right, these 5 elements, this piece about nature, and that we are part of nature and not a side of it. That also kind of relates to the nature of socialization and race,
Yeah.
and that this medicine is really, it can heal as many people as it can. It's just for the people, it's for everybody.
Yeah, right.
That's being played out as these roles of practitioner, healer, whatever you want to call it. But
right.
So I love that. That's how. How about the name Epiphany Acupuncture?
Well, I feel like that came from my own experience of acupuncture.
Yeah.
A lot of times as a patient, I was a patient for many years before I went to school. I was a patient for 5 years, and I'd always have these sessions where I'd have epiphanies or breakthroughs about my life, inner life breakthroughs. And I've learned over time that what epiphany does, what the energy of epiphany is that it heals rejection. Whether they're epiphanies about the collective or they're epiphanies about our personal lives, it's a physiological experience. Every cell in our body says yes.
Right.
And our DNA loves that. And then we can have these leaps in evolution, these leaps in growth. A lot of times we think growth is like this straight line, but I've found that through acupuncture, you can have these breakthrough moments where, because when we talk about things like spirit of the points, which is, every acupuncture point is a Chinese character that tells a story that's been around for thousands of years. It's very shamanic in some ways, these names. And I very much study these names. And I think that these acupuncture points are like little teachers. And so the reason why, as acupuncturists, I think it's important, we get to know our patient. And, that's, this healthcare system we have set up now, primary care physicians don't have that opportunity because it's about efficiency and being fast.
Right, exactly.
And we need that time to get to know our patients so we know what acupuncture point they need for that lesson, when you're practicing in this way.
Exactly. Like, people are comprised of these 5 elements and some. And so, yeah, when you're taking that time to really assess what's going on internally as well as within the external environment of your patient, right, then you can select the points in tandem with that. I love that.
Yeah.
Do the 5-element theory. So can you tell us some about like your own practice of self-care, right? Like, especially at this time, like while we are
well, it's all over the place. Sometimes, sometimes the best self-care is to not do self-care. I actually teach a self-care class at East West College. It's a 1-day class that's part of my Eastern curriculum.
Okay.
And I talk about how we shouldn't judge our self-care.
Yes.
Meaning, like, if your self-care is to like watch Netflix all day, Like, that's what you need to do sometimes.
Yeah,
That's okay.
I love that.
Um, but in general, like general themes upon my own personal self-care is creativity is number one, like for me, like, and that comes in the form of dancing, writing poetry, music. I feel like creativity helps us transform those emotions that we necessarily don't like to feel,
Yeah,
you know, like, I feel like there's such a secret to that of like creating, even if, and it can be terrible. It doesn't have to be good,
right.
you know?
Right.
And also I think creativity is an act of generosity. This is something one of my music teacher says, Joey Helprish, is that it's an act of generosity, because we're creating it to help heal our own wound, which is the world wound. We all carry a lot of the same wounds. We all, and we're figuring that out right now with COVID.
Yeah.
It's like, we're all suffering. That's what connects us.
Yeah.
So I think it's also important too for me, as a practitioner of medicine, that part of my self-care is honoring my fear, honoring my anxiety, and sitting with it sometimes.
Hmm.
So sometimes I sit in a room with it and I don't do anything. I just feel my anxiety, I feel my fear, I feel the grief, I feel the suffering. And other times I pick up a pen and I start writing, or I turn on music and I start dancing and freestyling. I've been freestyle rapping since I was 16.
That's awesome.
It's like, it's my jam. It's like how um,
I'm the
and,
headphones dancing at home type. That's my.
yeah.
I just love it. I'll come home from those long 11-hour days and woo.
Yeah, right, totally. And I think sometimes adults, we forget about that kind of play. you know that's kind of a mission I'm on. That's a mission I'm on right now in my heart, is like, how do I bring more play and creativity into healing?
Have you read Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown?
No, but please.
That's
Yeah, yeah, I love recommendations.
activist work as well. A lot of
Mm,
been in the you know four lines, front lines of that. It just would get so daunting at times, and Adrienne Marie Brown really kind of brought back
yeah,
the sense of play and creativity and fun, and you should be enjoying creating this, as well as
yeah,
that's one of the key principles to sustain it too. So
yeah, so true.
I think goes with healing. Uh,
Mm,
so tell us more about the five elements. You mentioned that you are elements, and you are affected by
yeah,
different ones at different times, especially within your self-care regimen. So can you kind of
yeah,
your understanding of five elements and the different roles that they play?
yeah. So one of my mentors, his name's David Ford. He's been practicing five element medicine for about 40 years. I bring up his name because I'm going to use one of his sayings to start how to answer that question, and that he says that we're all walking, talking landscapes.
Hmm.
So meaning, if we all, and this medicine comes from Taoism, and we would say that in Taoism, that first there was a void, there was just black, and then came this consciousness where the void had this thought, I am, I exist. And then there was this big explosion. And then that's where yin and yang came from. First there was yin, and then yang.
Mm-hmm.
And then came the five elements. And then came the 10,000 things.
Yep.
So if you're living your life by that story, our medicine is about getting back to that perfect balance, that we're all connected and we all came from the void. We all came from that nothingness. And so we're all connected.
You cannot
And,
avoid wood.
yeah. You cannot avoid the void. It's okay. It's a very scary place, but just hang out for a little bit and it becomes less scary. So when I'm with a patient, I'm looking at them as a walking, talking landscape, and I'm looking how much fire is in them, how much water, how much flora. I know a lot of people use the word wood,
Mm-hmm.
but flora is anything that grows. And oftentimes when I think of wood, I think of like treated wood or just trees. So often, I may get in trouble for this, but I like to use the word flora over wood, and I also like to use the word mineral over metal, because to me, I like to use words that kind of more encompass all of nature. Um, and these are all chi downloads that David Ford got, and they make sense to me because it's just about making sense, because we're translating them into English, right? So whatever helps us make sense of these concepts. And so all of these elements have organs that are attached to them. So the flora is the liver and the gallbladder. And then they also have, this medicine is mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. So not only does the liver and the gallbladder, have Western and Eastern functions, like the gallbladder releasing and storing bile, that kind of thing. But we would also say that the gallbladder is about decision making, and we call it the upright official.
Yeah.
So I might ask a patient a question like, so if you were sitting around and your friend gave you a phone call to ask you to go to the movies, how easy would that be for you to answer that question? And one time I had a patient, I asked a question like that, and they were like, oh, I don't even know if I'd answer the phone. Okay, well, let's look at your gallbladder today.
Right.
Maybe let's do a point gallbladder 37 called bright and clear.
Right.
And let's clear that up. That's more in the moment, that's more yang.
Yeah.
And then the yin, like the liver's in charge of planning and decision making. And there's also jurisprudence and social justice within the liver and the gallbladder. So someone who has that benevolence within them, that wanting to do good, and they have a strong liver, they're going to be like planning protests and planning big group things where we're all going to sign a petition and that kind of thing. Like if someone came into my office and that's what they started talking about, I'd be like, oh, I don't need to treat their liver. Their liver's good. They're a good planner. They have good, they care about other people. And then if you took that in a gallbladder sense, that's more the upright official. So that's more like, if they see injustice in the moment, they're going to stop it right there.
And for people who, are just tuning in and just now hearing about 5 elements maybe for the first time.
In terms of diagnostics, there's TCM, which is about patterns. So like liver qi stagnation, might be, irritability, right-sided headaches, that kind of thing. Those are physical things, right? Patterns. Yeah, patterns, right? Yeah, or like, lung qi deficiency might be like, low voice and get sick more often, fatigue, that kind of thing. These are all based on pathology, right? These are all based on what's wrong. So I try to flip my practice. I do flip my practice on its head. And I'm more interested in what's amazing about you first, before we talk about pathology, because there's also elements that will be strong. And I like to call those out because in traditional classical 5-element acupuncture, they would call those causative factors, which is, again, to me, the causative factor, more based in pathology. So I'm just evolving what I want to be doing with people. And I know that pathology comes up and we definitely talk about it, but I'm also interested in if you're really good at, communication and leadership, I want to acknowledge how beautiful your heart is and tell you that because that might help the issue you're having with your stomach and digestion.
Totally. You're supporting the upright. And my question now that my question was, we oftentimes, like when you're thinking about yin yang pair in the 5-element theory and you're thinking about organ versus channel, some people have very, very particular views about, right? A lot of people have had their gallbladder removed or something like that. Removed. So what actually happens then, right? Within 5-element theory, can you say a little bit more for that's now learning and listening to what's this 5-element thing? I think it's got lost on people that we are made up of elements.
Right.
Right. Even when we first heard that, it was like, oh, of course, yeah, duh.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you remembered the question because it's a good one. Yeah, I think because it makes me want to speak to this, and I know this is a stretch for some people, but I would say that all of our organs, they have a spirit to them. That's kind of what we were just talking about with, the spirit of the gallbladder is that clear decision maker inside of us. And so in that way, we can talk to our gallbladder. And even if it gets removed, we're not talking about the gallbladder as a ball of flesh, as an organ. We're talking about we don't call it organs in Chinese medicine, actually. We call them officials, right? Because they officiate different aspects of us. Like I said earlier, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Right. So that spirit of the gallbladder is in all of us, whether you have a gallbladder or not. Because the physical gallbladder is just one part of it. Right.
I love that too, because that is again harkening back to bolstering the upright, right? Because you're missing an organ doesn't mean that you're not a whole being still, you know, like
Yes.
not missing a part of a spirit of your organ or the organ itself. You still have functionality, and are official.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how has COVID-19 impacted your practice? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's been a lot, you know, to process these last 4 or 5 weeks. The day that we had to close our clinic
Mhm.
um, was really hard for me. And we were one of the early ones. We closed really early. Um, at Alder Family Medicine, where I work and run my LLC out of Epiphany Acupuncture, we treat a lot of chronic illness, and it just wasn't. It wouldn't be responsible of us. It would be irresponsible if we were to stay open, because I could be a carrier. you
Mhm.
know, and we don't have masks. And the care that we provide for people, um, is not for COVID. We're not sitting there going to be treating that. We can do things to prevent it, and we can do things to assist people, but we're not the primary providers for that situation.
Right.
And so we have a lot of therapies at our clinic. We have IV therapy and several others.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I practice acupuncture, which is physical. I got to touch you. I got to be near you. Um, and so we looked at everything, and we're not going to be able to pay our staff, and so we had to let go of more than half of our staff.
Oh, that's
And yeah, but we in letting them go, we knew they could get unemployment, which
right.
was good.
Yeah.
And we helped them with that process. Like, we became part of it to make it faster.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then the dream would be that we can hire them back when this is all over.
Yeah.
Um, I have been doing some Zoom telemedicine with people,
Oh, good.
and I have been I offered free 15 to 30-minute sessions, 5 element. I call them 5 element listening sessions,
Mhm.
for people that just feel fear, anxiety, overwhelmed. That I will just sit and listen to them, and then reflect back to them what they tell me in 5 element sense. So, I'm doing some herbalism, but my Chinese herbalism is not for COVID. It's for people that I've already been seeing for a year plus, and we were already on a plan,
Got it.
um, because I don't think it's smart to do a lot of Chinese herbal formulas with people you've never met.
Oh, yes.
So,
And
it was
of
yeah.
exercise in
I
the body.
mean, other people may have those skills, but I don't think it's not my main focus.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's
yeah,
good. That's good to highlight.
yeah.
So you're also a teacher at East West College of Healing Arts. Like, how has this been impactful?
Oh my.
Too? Like, tell us more.
Um, so much joy.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, I love teaching so much. It's impacted me so much. Um, it's just such an honor, you know, to be a part of uh, people who are starting their journey
Yeah.
to become a practitioner of medicine. And so, for me, I teach the Intro to Eastern Medicine class,
Awesome.
and then I teach Shiatsu, and those are 2 classes I teach. And to me, the material is secondary.
Mm.
Like, what I'm most interested in is inspiring people to be the best versions of themselves.
Mhm.
And I think that touch is undervalued in our medical world. The first thing I tell all of my massage students is that, please value yourself. You are just as valuable as any doctor, any surgeon, anybody, because this person could go around to all these different people to try to get help with their pain, and they come to see you, and you get to sit with them for an hour and listen, and then do body work. And all of a sudden, something happens where their pain goes away, like what happened to me in New Zealand. I was a massage therapist. You change people's lives, helping people feel more in their bodies and feel more relaxed and not stressed. Like, you can't put a value on that.
And that's what I love about Chinese medicine, East Asian medicines and lineages. And right, exactly, like really valuing not only self-care, because they already view it as collective care, right? It's just an integral part of another lifestyle that the United States especially is still being introduced to very slowly. And I think you're
Mhm.
right, like the value of touch, I think we're really kind of missing that too in this time of social distancing and mandated quarantine.
Yeah.
like so difficult to not even be able to, you know, sit next to somebody on the bus. It's the
I
same.
know.
How is
Yeah.
it going to shape our collective awareness and consciousness around people after? What will after look like? That's what I'm. And also, what will after look like in terms of medicine? I think that there have been so many large strides that we've seen, especially in the epicenter in China, of East meeting West in terms of medicine and how they, help to combat this pandemic. But it still is being explored, and um, it hasn't really been introduced into like this mainstream medicine here in the United States yet. Like,
Hmm.
do you think that we will be moving in that direction after this? Like, what do you think in terms of like the world of acupuncture or body work? Do you think
Yeah.
it will be held in greater esteem? Like, yeah.
I do, Joy. I do think it will. I just don't know when that will happen.
Hmm.
It's hard to predict when that will happen. However, I like to always think that, the light of love wins, and that we do need to be together. And I feel like some of us, not all of us, but some of us are feeling a little bit of this rejuvenation right now, where because we have to stop our story of our personal life story. And then so we have all this time to be with ourselves, and we get to ask ourselves, like, what am I doing? What is my purpose? Why? Why am I doing what I'm doing? If some of us have the privilege to ask that question, we're asking that question, and lives are different. And so I hope that individual rejuvenation, it turns into this collective rejuvenation,
Hmm.
and that acupuncture and body work and all these other physical therapies that work with the connective tissue and work with the mind, body, spirit, like that they will be, people are going to be just, craving it almost, like really wanting, because I'm thinking about all my patients that were getting weekly acupuncture with me, and now they're not. And so I'm really wondering how they're doing,
Yeah,
and
think that too about like chronic pain patients.
yeah,
Like sometimes this, even for me, I have a lot of chronic pain from an old bicycling accident. So a monthly massage, or, like when it would get really bad, like a biweekly massage was something that was of necessity to me. And I would budget for that, like
yeah,
I don't, uh, before any of this, I would never really go out. I would budget and do the things that I needed to do for my body. And so, I'm really just wondering, like, for you, what advice would you give your patients then regarding
mm,
at-home care, or just, people who are just now tuning in and learning about five element theory, or
hmm,
any of
hmm,
any of it?
yeah. I I thought about this, to listen to your heart. I know that's cliche, but let me explain a little bit more. The heart in Chinese medicine, we call the heart the emperor, the king and the queen. And there's these treatments we can do where we call reestablish the mandate, where we put our heart back in charge,
Mm-hmm.
because our heart should be the one making decisions for us.
Hmm.
So that's a personal thing, how to connect with your heart. That's different for every individual. We all have different ways. So I know there's probably lots of mental energy happening with people right now. The mind saying things like, how am I going to pay for this? What's going to happen to my job? A lot of uncertainty. But if you can find quiet where you can really check in with your heart, and what does your heart really need? Because sometimes self-care can be a routine, can be eating well, definitely, all of those things, that those affect our emotions. So eating well, um, you know movement, stagnation causes pain and disease. That's something we say in five element in Chinese medicine. So getting things to move. But I don't give you any specific things that you can do, other than, if you do yoga, do yoga. If you do qigong, do qigong. If you like to run, run. And sometimes your self-care means calling a loved one, or calling a friend
Hmm.
or a sibling. Like that can also change your mood.
Yeah.
So my self-care is to, like, do what helps make your soul relax, you
Yeah.
know on a soul level. And we're all in it together. We are all, I mean, we are all gonna be struggling to come back, from this financially. Like maybe not all of us, but a lot of us.
Oh yeah. Oh.
So a lot of us. So it's like, you know, listen to your mind, know when it's really trying to, but you're not going to think your way out of this problem. I'll tell you that.
And well,
There's no,
I think that's the new, shift in consciousness and paradigm too, is less thinking,
yeah.
feeling coming from
Mhm.
center, heart space, and a mindful, loving kindness approach. Perhaps even I spoke with a herbalist the other day, trauma informed approach, where right now everybody has been impacted by this collective trauma. So just
Mhm.
as mindful as a practitioner too is practicing from that heart space, that emperor space. Um,
Mhm.
I think that it does. It looks like an end to most, and to some, it looks like a brand new beginning. You know, um, and so that's another piece to be able to find balance in too, right? Like things are ending, some things just weren't working before, and now it's our chance
Yeah.
to start, building anew. And I think about that with the uh, jargon around five element theory, and even when we're putting together herbal formulas, right, you have like the chief and the deputy and the emperor, and those were
Mhm.
historical markers too within the medicine. You were compiling medical canonical information based
Mm.
on the uh, governance, like collective governance that was happening, right? Like shifts in revolutions, shifts in leaders, and how you were treating at that time, right? Like Shanghan Lun time looked very different than Wen Bing time, which is what we're seeing now too. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I thought that was interesting. We spoke with an astrologer this week too, and we're kind of cross-referencing Eastern and Western astrology, and
Yeah.
came up there too. It was like, oh yes, this is
Yeah. It goes back to how everything's connected, right?
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Dusty, thanks so much. And again, like I just love the space that you're coming from in your practice, and your mindfulness techniques and your creativity. And you just released some music too, so I want to link that, but I want you to plug it, and I'm going to
Yeah.
put that in the description box so that people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, thanks, Joy. Maybe by the time this is up, it'll be released, but it's not released yet. It'll be like next week or so. Little bits of it are released. Yeah, yeah. It's called "Inspired by My Friends." It's under my name, Dusty Bubbles. Um, that's my artist name. And I was supposed to be recording this in a studio, and then all of the COVID-19 stuff happened.
Oh,
And so instead of doing it in a studio, I've been doing it at my house.
awesome.
And yeah, and just saying, and there was so much coming up with that, so much anxiety, but I just did it. And yeah, I think part of that is I want to help my patients as much as I can live out their dreams. And I realized, well, I need to do the same thing.
Exactly.
So I've been on that journey for a while. I have a music coach. I've been learning how to play the keyboard, and I use my keyboard to make beats. And so I produced the whole album myself. um, every beat i'm every beat I made, and I never thought I'd be able to do it. And it all started because I wanted to make a Chinese medicine hip hop album, because
Yes.
I have these element songs, I have these different songs, and people kept requesting them.
Mhm.
Like I would perform them at my school, the school I teach at too, and they'd be like, where's your spleen song, where's your stomach song? And so I
Can we post those too?
well, I haven't got those done yet because
Okay, okay.
I contacted this music coach to help me make a Chinese medicine hip hop album. And he was like, well, cool, but I'm going to teach you how to make beats first. He's like, you have to understand the music. You have to understand how to do this before. That's what makes a good rapper.
Mm.
And so um, about a week into this, I decided to drop the Chinese medicine hip hop album idea for now, because I realized that it's very hard to create when you have a strong agenda.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
I'm more of an in the moment, in the flow kind of guy.
Love it.
So this album that's coming out next week, Inspired by My Friends, is just completely from that experience, from the experience of just letting go, like the large intestine, and and which is also connected to self-worth, and being like, I value my creativity, I value that it's going to do good in the world. And that's what happened. There's 8 tracks on it, and I can't believe it. I'm still in shock that I've created that. I've wanted to do it since I was like 16, and it's finally happening. So I'm 34 now. So
Oh,
yay.
the 8 trigrams.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dusty, for being on here with me this morning.
Yeah.
I'm going to link all your linkables, and good luck to you and Brooke. You're expecting
Yeah.
delivery very soon in a couple weeks. So
Yeah. Thank you again, Joy. It was so good to see you, and thank you for this work that you're doing. It's very valuable.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Peace.
Peace.